dismantled the shed today.
Why did you build and dismantle?
I built my new one, dismantled my old one.
A nice shed.
It's dead easy to put up. It's a kettle one. It's a dirty one. It's plastic. It's dead easy to put up, but it's just dismantled the shed today.
Just too late. After that's iron, it won't be long before we finish Eiruvin. Can you imagine?
Yeah, 35 daft to go.
No, more than a week, 2-3 weeks. Yeah, 4 weeks.
105 daft. So start thinking of something. Three sections, three books. Three sections.
What?
Soccer. The arsenal.
It's 3?
It's about 120 daft, isn't it?
We've got 35 daf left.
20-ish.
Month notice.
I know, it's not easy to get all the, you have to get through all the long ones.
Which ones?
All of them so far.
Yeah, they've all been made long, yes, after you get short.
All ones in, like, where it gets easier.
When are you not? Tuesday,
Wednesday, yeah. I haven't worked out what to do yet. I tried to. Oh, can you text me? Is this one any good? It's a bit bigger.
I just need one I can write on the map which ones I
don't know if you can write on that. Can you write laminated? I'm not sure.
I don't think you laminated one. Give me
Right.
tomorrow. I'll text you tomorrow.
Text me about. I leave my house about 6 to get here. No, it depends. Depends if I have my or not. Okay. Each day is different. Still every day I'm in Chemav here at about 5:40, whatever, 5:50. Why is the clock changing? This not a Shabbos. This not a Shabbos. Oh, that's very good. So after that, we have to have 8:45, yeah.
49 right, yeah.
Oh, I have to get people to come. Right. We're up to Daf Ayin Omud Aleph. 2-3 lines from the top, and this is a Gemara where it's very, very important to keep track as much as possible.
Not on Sunday night.
On a Sunday night. So I actually struggled with it. Okay, the most important aspect is always to remember the rules. If you remember the rules, if you remember the principles, then everything is much, much, much easier. I'm just going to summarize some of the basic halachas. We've said this a million times. If there's lots of us living around one chutzah, we're not allowed to carry from the house into the chutzah, because the house belongs to each individual privately, and the chutzah belongs to all of us. So therefore, you're actually carrying from one rishus to another. The ideal solution is what we call Eiruvin, but this Gemara is not talking about Eiruvin. This Gemara is only talking about bittul rishus. We've had a lot of bittul rishus. We'll continue to have bittul rishus. Bittul rishus is what? It's a relinquishing of one's property, and that works. As we mentioned yesterday, it's not always work, and I want to just talk about the last thing we mentioned because it comes up a few times today. If you remember, we talked about a situation where there's 2 people relinquishing, or relinquishing two people. 2 people relinquishing is okay, right? Reuven and Shimon live in a chutzah. They both forgot to do an eruv. They both relinquish. They will not be allowed to carry. But everybody else is allowed to carry, because it's as if the property of the chutzah does not belong to Reuven and Shimon anymore. So therefore they're out, everybody else is in. It's brilliant. But you cannot relinquish a property to Reuven and Shimon in such a case. Why not? Why can't you? We explained yesterday, because you relinquish to Reuven, and he can't carry because he's got Shimon. You relinquish to Shimon, he can't carry, he's got Reuven. And even if Reuven would then say to Shimon, you know what, everything relinquished to me, I'll relinquish to you, even that's no good. We explained because when they relinquished to him, they didn't relinquish something which he could use, because at the end of the day, he still can't carry because of Shimon. So even now he gives it over, he's not giving it over the right to carry, so it doesn't work. That is what we said yesterday. If it's very clear, then everything else fits in easy. It says more like this. We're up to Daf Ayin Amud Aleph, 3rd line, the last word on the line. Boy minei abai merabah. Abai asked Rabbi the following question: 5 people living in one chotzer. One of them forgot. What did I say? Sorry, 3 lines from the top. 5 people living in one chotzer. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar. 5 people. One of them forgot and did not join in. When he's mevatel the shus, does need to do a bittul for every single one. So let's say Reuven forgot to join in. Does he need to go to Shimon and to Levi and to Yisachar individually and say to them, I'm mevatel the shus to you, and to you? Or is it enough just to say to Shimon, I'm mevatel by the shus? The police already discussed this, Shaila. Let's say, by the way, what would you pass in such a case? Any of you would want to suggest psak in such a question?
Any one of them
Would be
they're
enough.
all equal. They're all apart. So you go
Right.
to any one of them, he has power to say yes on
Right.
behalf of one.
So you say one's enough. What? Right. I was hoping, must admit. No. Yeah, it's more than that. Okay, it's like Eiruvin is a hard sector. We actually discussed this Shaila once before. And we said it's Machlikas Tanoim Ablezen Avon. And the first time I read this Gemara, I was stuck. I was thinking to myself, hey, what's going on over here? I asked him a Shaila, why didn't you say to Machlikas Tanoim? They're happy. Tosfos asks the question. And Tosfos says that they never knew the previous Gemara. And in fact, they only did not know the previous Gemara, says Tosfos. Don't tell me that they knew the previous Gemara, but that they were asking according to one of their opinions, which is usually what Tosfos answers. Because the Gemara is straight, we're going to ask a raya from a brisa. Now, if we already know it's Machlikas Tanoim, no raya from a brisa will ever help us, because we would just say that's a different time. So the Gemara did not know, they did not know the previous sugya. I saw the Ritva asks the question. What do you mean they didn't know the previous Gemara? But Abai asks it to Rabbi. And in that previous Gemara, Abai joins in the discussion. So it's also not a kasha. That discussion happened at a later stage. Okay. You don't need to. The best says you do need to. But this Gemara ignores that whole previous Gemara. We started from scratch. And the question is, do you need to be battled to every single one? Or can you just be battled to one? That's the question of the Gemara. So what did Rabbi reply? You have to battle to every single one. And it's actually a machlikas of poskim. How do you do it? Do you say, I'm mevatel lekulchem, I'm mevatel to all of you, one word, that means one sentence? Or does it need to go to each one? I'm mevatel to you, I'm mevatel to you, Levi, I'm mevatel to you, that's machlikas of poskim. But the Maisa, he has to mevatel to every single one. Eisvei. Abaya straight away says to Rabbi, I asked you a question, you gave me an answer, I'm going to ask you a question from Price. And he brings a Price. And it's nice to get this Price clear that the Price is actually saying 7 statements in Hilchos Bittul. 7 different statements. 4 kinds of Bittul that do work, and 3 that don't. And later the Gemara examines each case separately. 7 cases of Bittul, 4 that work, and 3 that don't. So let's get the 7 cases clear. Echad shloi irev, one person did not do an Eruv. Noisin l'shus le'echad sh'irev. You can do mevatel the shus to somebody else who did do an Eruv. Question: how many people are living in that chotzer?
6.
What we used to say 6.
Has to be at least.
The least. What's the least amount? What's the least amount? What's the least amount? I thought for second.
3.
Really. Why 3?
Because one person's not in it. One person's not in Eruv.
And the other one
The other one must be part of the Eruv.
did an Eruv. How can you do an Eruv without another person? There must be a minimum of 3 people in this chotzer. Why? What's the halacha? Let's get the halacha clear. One person who did not join an Eruv is allowed to mevatel his reshus to one person who did do an Eruv. The one who did an Eruv, you can't do an Eruv by yourself. So who did an Eruv did it with someone else. So there has to be at least 3 people. Reuven is mevatel reshus to Shimon, who did an Eruv with the Levi, and that's okay. Now, why is that okay when Reuven does a bit of reshus to Shimon? Because at the end of the day, he's relig with reshus. By the way, is this already a kasha rabbi? This already would be a kasha rabbi. In fact, the Gemara could have stopped here. But the Gemara very often does it, is it brings the entire brisa and only acts at the very end. But the Maisa, this would be a kasha. Let's read the words again. Echad esrei, echad shloi irev, one Reuven didn't do an Eruv, noisin l'shus, and mevatel l'shus le'echad sh'irev, to one who did do an Eruv. Right. So you already see that one person is enough. That means you don't need to do bitter like Rabbi said to every single person. Because we're talking about a minimum of 3 people in Eruv. As we said, how do you know there's 3 people? Because there's no 3 people, how can you do 1 to 2? And he said you do 2, 1 who did an Eruv. So you see clearly that all you need to do is to 1, you don't need to do it to 2. Okay. So that's case number 1. Case number 2. Shnaim she'irvu, 2 people did an Eruv. They can relinquish the reshus to 1 who did not do an Eruv. If you remember before I said, 2 people cannot relinquish a reshus. You can't relinquish a reshus to 2 people. So yeah, so here it's not the same. So let's go later. Again, here we're talking about 2 people that did an Eruv. So Reuven and Shimon did an Eruv together. And they're allowed to give reshus to Levi who did not. That's case number 2. Why? What's the logic? It's obvious. Because since they did an Eruv, they have a joint ownership in the Rechatz. They relinquish it to Levi, and it's fine, and Levi will be able to carry them not.
Why didn't both need to? I'm sure all of these two.
No, because consider like a joint ownership in everything. So therefore, everything belongs to both. That's what we looked at. They both have to give. Case number 3. V'shnayim shelo irvu. 2 that never did an Eruv. Nois neshus and the she'irvu. They can give permission to 2 that did do an Eruv. You can have 2 people relinquishing to 2 that did do an Eruv, right? Go Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Levi and Yehuda made an Eruv together. Reuven and Shimon never joined in. Reuven relinquishes, Shimon relinquishes, and Levi Yehuda will be able to carry. Case number 4. If there's 2 people, there's 3 people, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, nobody did an Eruv. So Reuven and Shimon that didn't do an Eruv can relinquish it to Levi. Like more later we'll discuss what's the chiddush in every one of these cases. Those 4 cases were very, very brief. 1 who didn't do an Eruv can give a reshus to 1 who did do an Eruv. 2 that did do an Eruv could do a reshus to 1 that did not do an Eruv. 2 that did not do an Eruv can do a bit of a reshus to either 2 that did do an Eruv or to 1 that did not do an Eruv. Avol. But what's the 3 cases that don't work? Ein echad she'irev, there's reshus le'echad shelo irev. Let's say one person did an Eruv, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. So Reuven and Shimon did an Eruv together. Comes along Reuven and says to Levi, you know, I'm relinquishing my reshus to you. That doesn't work. Why does that not work? Right? And even more than that, Reuven and Shimon make an Eruv. Both would need to. So how is it going to help by Reuven relinquishing his reshus to Levi? Shimon still owns a partnership. Let's say, for example, we decide to buy together this cup. And I say to Chaim, you know what? I'm letting you have it. Can he use it? No, because it belongs to the 2 of us. So over here we did an Eruv, so therefore now it belongs to the 2 of us, and now one of us relinquishes the reshus. How's that going to help? So again, one who did the Eruv, we can't do that, because at the end of the day that person won't be able to carry. Because at the end of the day you need 2 that did do an Eruv can't relinquish the reshus to 2 that did not do an Eruv. Why? This we discussed actually at the beginning. 2 did an Eruv. Can't give it to 2 that did not do an Eruv. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Reuven and Shimon made an Eruv. And now they're relinquishing it to Levi and Yehuda. When they relinquish it to Levi, can Levi carry? No. Because they still got Yehuda who owns it and never did an Eruv with it. And then even if afterwards they give it to Yehuda, they still can't carry Levi and Yehuda. This is something we discussed. If Reuven and Shimon did an Eruv, they relinquish it to Levi and to Yehuda, it still won't work. Because with the relinquishment to Levi, he still can't carry because he's got Yehuda who didn't do an Eruv, and Yehuda can't because of Levi. 2 that did not do an Eruv, they can't do Nois neshus shnaim shelo irvu. And if you've got 2 without an Eruv, can't do to 2 that without an Eruv. So let's say there's 4 of us. None of us did an Eruv, so we can't do 2 to 2. And that's obvious really, because if there's 4 of us, and Reuven and Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, and 2 never did an Eruv, and they give it to Levi, and Yehuda didn't do an Eruv, so Levi won't be able to carry because of Yehuda, Yehuda won't be able to carry because of Levi, so it doesn't work. That is the end of the 7 cases we had of Bitul Reshus. If you think about it, once you have the principle basically clear, that Bitul Reshus means relinquishing one's ability to use it, and it has to work, it has to have a logic, so it has to work with a certain method. So if there's a number of us together, and we want that somebody should be able to carry, one person make a simcha, want to be able to carry, we have to make it, at the end of the day, he's got sole ownership. Now, Abaya's original question was what? That when the person does a bit of a reshus, does he have to go to every individual? Rabbi replied to him, yes, you do. Came along Abai straight away and asked him for this price. There are 7 cases. And case number 1, he says straight away, Ketani Mir Sveisha, the very first case. Echad Shelo Irev, one that did not do an Erev, no Yisrael Reshus Le'echad She'erev. What's the case? If there's nobody else, it's just the two of them. How did you do an Eruv? What could you do an Eruv? Must have something else with them. You only have to do to what? So the three people. One did an Eruv with the second, and the third one that didn't do an Eruv does bitul l'shus to just one, and it works. Not like Rabbah. Answers well with Rabbah. What would Rabbah say? The person was there and he died. Let's get it clear. It was Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Shimon and Levi made an Eruv together. Reuven never did. Now, according to Rabbah, you have to do a bitul l'shus to Shimon and to Levi. And the Bryce says you need to do it to one. Says Rabbah that the first case of the Bryce is talking about where Levi died, and therefore now Reuven can go to Shimon and do bitul l'shus to him. Now, sorry? We'll see, there's quite a chidush, but let's just get to one or 2 points clear. Rashi comes up with quite an interesting question. Rashi asks the kasha. Yes, dying help. Dying is a way of relinquishing one's wishes. Rashi asks the question, but there's a Yerush, and the Yerush will take over.
That's what I meant, right? Dying help. I meant
exactly.
someone not just take over.
Right. So the Ritva, because of this, this has a very big kimta, that we're talking about a gear without Yoshim. But Rashi himself says a very interesting kimta, that we're talking about where it didn't really, this chotzer never belonged to anybody. It was a newly made chotzer. It gives the case which we've had before, we've had many times again. Two people live on opposite sides, very new. They're very new. Does it belong to anybody? No. On Shabbos, the Goyim came and made a wall. So now the chotzer between belongs to the children. And then they did, then it doesn't matter. So even if it's did before Shabbos, but it doesn't really belong to anybody. So when he dies, there's nothing to Yash. It's just a bit. Teresa says, and this is how we pass on very strange Rashi, very strange ritual, that the halacha is that if somebody dies on Shabbos, he doesn't become, the Yerush does not forbid the Eruv unless he actually moves in immediately. But when a person dies, in fact, it doesn't answer. So Rashi did not need to make the kimta that we're talking about, this complicated chotzer which they made a wall around it. And we don't need to talk about, let's just see the Rashi inside, the Haba Miss. The chimes in the Yosham Shav Klum, we talk about like a desert or a street. Rashi says that Yerush asks. And the Maisa we will see, the more later discuss it, the Yerush does not ask in the middle of Shabbos. No, Yerush gets it automatically without the kinyan. You don't need a kinyan to be Yerush. In fact, Tesa says, if you look, we did the first Tesa, they didn't know the Bryce. So the second Tesa says, Ubechinam dochak, he brings the whole Rashi. He didn't need to tell us that came to Dena Yerush Oisam, can only chloto shop. Okay. So Maisa Tesa says it wasn't necessary to make that kimta. So the Maisa. Abai asked Rabbi, do you need to do bittul to every person? Rabbi said, no, you don't. So Abai said, yes, I have a Abai said that you so Rabbi said you do. Rabbi says you do. So Abai said to him, no, you don't, because the Abai says you need to do bittul to one. Said Rabbi, that Abai says talk about when another one died. Okay. Says the Gemara, either have or miss, if we talk about when the third one died. Ema Sefer, let's examine the later cases. The cases, the Sefer, the Gemara compares the Reisha is all the cases which works, the 4 cases that work, and the 3 which don't is the Sefer. So the first case in the Sefer was, we said that if there's 3 people, and one of them did an Eruv with a second, Reuven and Shimon did an Eruv together. And then what happened was, one of them wants to give bitul l'shus to Levi, then it doesn't work. Why does it not work? What did we say, if you remember the logic? Because the other one needs to. Now, if the other one is dead, then they don't need it. So from the fact that very good. Again, why the first case of the Sefer which it doesn't work is one who did an Eruv with another can't be back to the Shus to a third. Why not? Because since he did an Eruv with another person, so they own it to the partnership. If I own something in partnership, I can't give it to somebody else. I have to get permission from the partner. Now, if the partner is dead, then I don't need his permission. Since I don't need his permission, so therefore I can do bitul l'shus. So the fact that the Bais and the Sefer says you can't, must be talking about the other one didn't die. And if the Sefer is he didn't die, so the Pashtas the Reishas also. Oh, very good. If he's already dead, the partner, my Lord, if the Sefer if the Sefer is about with around the Sefer, so what says mid area? Can you compare? The Reish is talking about when one died, and the Sefer one's when he never died. So the Reish says you need to do Bittul Rishus to one because the one's dead, and the Sefer says you can do it okay. One person cannot give it to the other because he did a partnership with the partner hasn't Teda. Says Rabba, I'm going to from this price that you prove to me that you don't need to do it to everyone. I'll prove to you that you do need to do it to everyone. Why? Diktani Sefer the Reisha, the end of the Reisha. We said there are 4 cases in the Reisha which is okay. The end of the Reisha which says V'shnaim shloi irvu, 2 that did not do the day of this was just the V'shnaim shloi irvu. Let's say, for example, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Reuven and Shimon never did a nail. Levi and Yehuda did do a nail. So Reuven and Shimon can both come along to Levi and Yehuda and say, we relinquish the Rishus to you. And why does it work then? Why does it work then to those 2? Because since they did a partnership and you're relinquishing to them, it's not like you're relinquishing to 2 people who never made an Eiruvin, whereby relinquishing to one is still awesome, relinquishing to the other one is awesome. Here you're relinquishing to 2 people that actually made an Eiruvin together. So they've got a partnership, and therefore you can relinquish to them. But if you listen carefully to the words of the Brisa, what does it say? Listen to the 2 that made an Eiruvin. It says clearly in the Brisa that when you do Bittul Rishus, how do you do it? You have to do it to both, not one. It's a right. What? I didn't catch that. It's conditional. No, so he says, Elavai is right, the Brisa begins to miss. That he died. Says the Gemara, Va'abaya, Omar, Ma'ilishnaim, Le'echot Mishnaim. When it means 2, it just means when there's 2 people around, you could do a bit of a shus to 2, one of the 2 is enough. If that's the case, listening, the Brisa could have just as well said, Le'echot Shiur, Le'echot Shlo Irav Kash. That means the Brisa could have said that 2 of them can relinquish the rishus to one who made an Eruv. One who made an Eruv, anybody knows, is how many people? Another 2. Because otherwise, one who made an Eruv must be another 2 people. Or Le'echot Shlo Irav, meaning that they could have made an Eruv, but he didn't. It must be another 2 people, otherwise who else there is? Kasha, it's a Kasha, we've said this a few times. Whenever the Gemara says Kasha and not to Yufta, what's the difference? Very good. And to Yufta means there's no answer. That's in Pashas the Rishonim would say. And in fact, the Rishonim have given a number of answers as to what the Gemara could have answered over here. But the Kasha quite itself is pretty obvious in the sense that the Brisa is telling us that when there's 2, you can do bit of Rishus. If you only say Le'echod, it won't be emphasizing the Eka Chiddush, which you can do to 2 when they've done Eruv. Because the Eka Chiddush of the Brisa is that when 2 people haven't done Eruv, you can't, then you can't. Okay.
If there's Tiyufta, why do you say Tiku? Tiyufta is
no, Tiku is what we don't know. Tiyufta is it's a Kasha we don't know the answer to. A Kasha means it's as if Tiku is when there's a Shaila, meaning it's halachic, we don't know what's right, what's wrong with we've got to. Okay. Says the Gemara right. Now what the Gemara is going to do, which is quite difficult, is we've got 7 cases in the Brisa, and we're going to have to examine all 7 cases of the Brisa according to Abaya and according to Rabba, and each time work out what is the Chiddush of the Brisa in all 7 cases. So let's go through the 7 cases. In fact, if you look on this side, many people are like, yeah, Gufa. Let's recap. Let's say, what did you say? The first case. What's the first case? Echad Shnei Irav. One person never made the Irav. Nesun Shus Echad Sheirav. La Abaya De'isei. We're talking about when there's 3 people, and he did a bit of a shus to only one of the 2. The first case, the Brisa teaches a very big chiddush that you need to do a bit of a shus to 1 out of the 2, and that's a big chiddush. Le Rabba, according to Rabba, what's the chiddush? To have or miss, because according to Rabba, you need to do a bit of a shus to everybody. So we talk about the worst 3 at the beginning of Shabbos, and 2 of them made an Eruv, 1 never, and that person could do a bit of a shus to only 1 who's left alive. If that's the case, what's the chiddush? There's only 1 person left alive. So, we're not chayshish that if we allow you to do a bit of a shus to the 1 person who's alive, you may therefore think to yourself, I can do a bit of a shus just to 1. Because the Shabbos started off with 3 people, and there were 3 people in the same chatzah. 2 made an Eruv together, 1 made an Eruv to the 2. So, and 1 has been battled to 1 of the 2. You might have thought that people might not distinguish between the fact that 1 person died or not, and say, well, if you do bittul to 1, you can always do bittul to 1. So the chiddush of the first case, according to Abaya, is that you only need to do bittul to 1. According to Rabba, that when a person dies, you need to bittul to 1 and not chayshish that you'll come through to 2. Second case. The Shnaim She'irvu, 2 that did do make an Eruv together. This was just an Echad Shlo Irav, could do 1 that didn't do an Eruv. Pshita. Mao the same Mekim to the Eruv Liknesek. You might have thought, why didn't he join in the Eruv? The fact is, he should have joined in the Eruv. Kamash Malon, that the fact that he didn't join in the Eruv, even though it's a mitzvah to join in the Eruv, where he doesn't get the knas that we don't do bit of a shus. This chiddush actually was brought down in our Mishnah, by the way, because the Mishnah says you could do a bit of a shus to somebody who didn't join in the Eruv. I didn't catch that. What? No, because the first case, the one who did not do the Eruv is being Mavatal Rishus. Again, it's very good that I've said this. The first case is the one who did not do the Eruv is relinquishing to those who did the Eruv. In the second case, is those who did the Eruv are relinquishing to the one who did not. You might have thought the one who did not doesn't deserve that we should allow him to get other people's Rishus. Third case, two that did not make an Eruv. What's the Chiddush from the Sefer Yehuda? That it says clearly you have to do it to two people to teach you that you have to do bitul reshus to everyone. And Rabba's medayik from these words, lishnaim, that when you do bitul reshus, you have to do it to every single person. You can't just do it to one. La baya shnaim shleivu tzichelei. The Chiddush over here is slightly different. According to Abai, we've talked about this many times. If there are two people that did not do an Eruv, can you relinquish reshus to them? No. Why can't you do bitul reshus to them? Because they're not going to be able to carry on afterwards. So you might have thought, since you can't relinquish to them, they should not be able to relinquish to others. Kamash Balon, the third case of the Brisa, that two people can relinquish even if they haven't done an Eruv, even though you can't relinquish to them. You shouldn't think, since you can't relinquish to them, they cannot relinquish. Kamash Balon, that's okay. Fourth case, to one person did the Eruv Lomari. Here we're talking about two people who did not do an Eruv, relinquishing to one person who did not do an Eruv. So did anybody do an Eruv in this chassan? No, nobody did an Eruv in this chassan. So you might have thought that normally Chazal allowed bitul reshus when you tried to make an Eruv and it didn't work out. One person forgot, one person wasn't able, one person was being stubborn. But here you've got a chassan where nobody bothered making an Eruv. So you might have thought in such a case that Chazal would not allow you to make a bitul reshus. Chazal did not want people to forget. Again and again we see, I was speaking to Rob about a month ago, said that when you get to this period, you'll see again and again how important it is to make an Eruv. Because you see again, the Gemara's got it sad. Again, the Gemara's got it sad over here that if three people live in the Chotzah and they never made an Eruv, you should not be allowed to do bitul reshus. Why not? Because why did nobody make an Eruv? So you might have thought, Kamash Balon. Avol. Now we're up to the last three cases of the vice. The case is one person did an Eruv, there's three people, one did an Eruv, and he's not allowed to give it over to the one who did not do an Eruv. To tell us that what we're talking about when he never died. Rabbi made a kim to that he died. Abai proved in this case that he didn't die. What's the proof that he didn't die? Because if he did die, why can't he do a bitul reshus? Elamai, the reason why we're talking about when the third person is still alive means the two people who did the Eruv together are still alive, and one can't do a bitul reshus because they're still alive. The Rabbi added on the Safer. Sometimes the Brisa likes to show the contrast, even though there's no real chiddush. In the Reish, we talk about 1-to-1, so here we talk about 1-to-1, even though the Maisa will not. There's no actual chiddush in it. Now we're up to case number 6. Two that did make an Eruv can't give to two that did not make an Eruv. So that we're talking about two people can't do to two that did not make an Eruv. Why not? As we said many times, because none of them gave it good. Hosu Lomali already learned it earlier. Even if afterwards, let's say the two people make an Eruv, and then Mabatal to Levi and to Yehuda, and then afterwards Levi is Mabatal to Yehuda. Even so you can't, because since when Levi got it, he was not able to carry, because when he got the bitul reshus, it was not an ability to carry because there was still Yehuda around, therefore it doesn't work. The bottom, when they cancelled, when they relinquished, he had no permission to be in the chotza. And finally, the 7th case, the last case is two that did not make an Eruv, can't give to two that did not make an Eruv. Was a hosul lomari. We had this at the top of the page, the end of yesterday. That even in a case where two people were vatal reshus to the other two who did not make an Eruv, and they say to them, we're giving it to you on condition that you're makneh to someone else, even so, it doesn't work, because at the time when they relinquish the reshus, they have to have the ability to be kohen. Okay, so let's just summarize. Let's go to a new topic, because it's actually not a new topic completely, kind of to reshus, but this was a complicated. Rather, Bryce, which discusses 7 different cases of bittul, 4 that work, 3 that don't. Rabbi holds that when you do bittul, you have to do bittul to every single one. Abaya holds you don't. We had 7 cases, all the different chidushim. The Eker chidushim is basically what we actually learned in our Mishnah, that you can do bitul reshus always, even in a case where nobody bothered making an Eruv, Chazal did not make an Issa D'Rabbanon of saying, hey, what's going on? Why didn't you bother making there? Why were you so lazy? Even so, they allowed you to do B'tul Rishus. But you're not allowed to do B'tul Rishus to two people, even in a case where they each one cancels to the other. And even if you tell him, I'm giving it to you on condition that you cancel it to the other, even that doesn't work. Why? Because the Svor B'tul Rishus is that I move out and you can move in. But if when I move out, you still can't move in because there's someone else, and only at the later stages the battle to you, that doesn't work. So that's the end of that. New Shaila. Yerush Ma'u Shevatel Rishus. Can a Yerush be Mavatel Rishus? Again, let's just discuss this a little bit. We're talking about when the father did not make an Eruv. Because had the father made an Eruv, what would the halacha be? What did we say before? It continues the heter. But over here we're talking about when the father never made an Eruv. And then what happened was like this. The father could have been Mavatel Rishus. But he didn't. He didn't Mavatel Rishus. He just died. And now the son wants to know, can he Mavatel Rishus? This is actually the whole avichus of this story. Actually, what every tesis today means the Shaktatar of every tesis.
The son that wants to know, or is it the other people?
The other people want to know. The other people want to know. This is the third tesis. Right, he does own it. The second the father dies, the children yashim immediately. So the question we'll more discuss in a minute, what's the chiddush? No, if it's out of town, he will not be able to do a bit of rishus. Simply, he doesn't know about it. We're talking about what happened was a man dies, and there's somebody wants to carry into the chutzes. They go up to the son and say, look, your father died, can you relinquish your rishus in order that we should be able to carry? And this is very marich that we talk about when the father never made the Eruv. Because if the father made the Eruv, then we'd have no Shiloh. That's the main gist of the third text. Okay, top of Einam of this. The Gemara now explains what is the logic. When a person has the potential to make an Eruv, he could make an Eruv, so then on Shabbos he could do bitter. But this one, if you wanted to do an Eruv from yesterday, he cannot. So he can't do bitter. That means the Gemara is clearing like this. Do we say, you the son, on Friday, could you have joined in the Eruv? No, because at the time when it came to Shabbos coming in, you weren't allowed to. You weren't part of this chotzer. You didn't even have an ownership. You had no share in this chotzer. So when Friday came in, you didn't have a right. Since you didn't have a right for the chotzer, therefore you don't have a right on Shabbos to do bitter. Or do we say no? A son takes over for the father. This is a famous shaila, we have many times the more clears how much is a son like a taking over from the father. Oh, so Nachman replied, "Ani mavatel he can valid beishmor tonu ein mavatel." So it's machlikas and we're mavatel or not. We pass we can. Again, we're talking about where a man dies without making an eruv, that his son can mavatel for. Again, straight away he asks him from a brisa. Zeh haklam. Again, this brisa tells us a lot of halachas. Zeh haklam. This is the rule. The Gemara is going to understand whenever it says zeh haklam, what does the word zeh haklam mean?
General.
It's a general, very good. It's a
time when it will be.
No, more than that. More than that, zeh haklam is general rule, meaning that this rule applies in more cases than I'm talking to you. Right? If I said this is a general rule, I'm telling you that this halacha applies in other cases which I haven't clearly told you, which you can work it out. And the Gemara understands that this word zeh klal is going on every halacha in the brisa. So every halacha in the brisa has got the halacha and the general rule of the halacha, meaning applications which the brisa never even mentioned. So what's the brisa say? Kol shemutar mikzas Shabbos utar chol Shabbos. Anything which is mutar for part of Shabbos and mutar for the whole Shabbos. The Gemara is going to discuss it, so I'm not going to explain the brisa. We'll wait to get it. So if it's mutar for half of Shabbos, mutar for the whole Shabbos. If it's also for half of Shabbos, Shabbos. Exceptions Shabbos. Normally, if it's mutter when Shabbos came in, it stays mutter. When it's also when Shabbos came in, it stays also. And this exception is bitul v'shus. So the vice says, I was going to bring the picture book. Not that it's actually so necessary. Not that it's so necessary, but just but it's simply because it's nice to have a few pictures coming up. Here. Do you mind uploading it?
Come on, Tommy. Get your camera on.
Right. So, have you got it? Have you got the page Tov Tes Zayin all the way to Tov Chof? There's 5 pictures. Not major. Have you got it? So if I pass it to Tali, they can upload it. Mind? Tov Zayin, Tov Chav. It's 5 pictures. The next 2 I didn't even get to today. But let's see, Tov Zayin. You can do all 5 of them that way. We'll have it up. Right. Again, let's get it clear what the Brisa says. What did the Brisa say? Brisa said like this: anything which is mutter Shabbos came in mutter the whole Shabbos. Also, when Shabbos came in, is also the whole Shabbos, except for bits of rishos. And the Brisa now explains the cases. Actually, these halachas are very nugei l'maisa. Kol shehuta makes the Shabbos mutter l'chol Shabbos. Something which is mutter Shabbos came in is mutter for the whole Shabbos. You go in Eruv derech Pesach, Nissan Pesach, Eruv derech Chaloy, Nissan derech Chaloy. So those are the 2 first pictures, which hopefully by now will be uploaded. And now it's Tov Zayin and Tov Yud Zayin. Well, basically what happened was like this. Imagine Reuben and Shimon are neighbors. They want to make an Eruv together. What's the most essential thing to have an Eruv together? What do they have to have? They have to have access. Very good. They have to have a doorway going through. So they had the access. An access can be a door, an entrance, or it can be a window. And then what happened was in the middle of Shabbos, the access got blocked up, or the window got blocked up. So that's picture Tov Zayin, where the wall suddenly, they had the entranceway gets blocked up, and Tov Yud Zayin, where the window gets blocked up. So what would you say? Are they allowed to carry or not allowed to carry?
Yes.
Very good. They're allowed to. Ask the Rishonim how they're going to carry. They can't get through. What's the answer? Over the fence. Or
push it back over. Unblock it.
Well, if it's unblocked, then it's not blocked anymore. So over the fence, another answer. What to say?
Ladders.
Okay, but with the words for what's the other? The Meiri says that they've got windows less than 4x4. So that you're allowed to go through. Now, what's the problem with the window less than 4x4? It's not an access point. Since it's not an access point, you can't do an Eruv. So they had a proper access point of a window. And that's how they could do the Eruv. But then what happened was the window got blocked. So now they can continue carrying either over the fence or through the fence if there's got cracks and holes or windows, which are small windows in the fence. Okay. So that's the halacha. It's a very important halacha. So again, it's mutter. Zeh we said, whenever it's a zeh is coming to include la suye, movi shnitnu karoisa v'lechio. We had a movi, and we wanted to fix it, and we put a lechi and a koira. What's a lechi? Post. And what's a koira? Beam. And in the middle of Shabbos, a goy comes along and takes away the post or the beam. What's the din? It's still okay because the Shabbos came in. It's okay. Yes, no, yeah. So I tell you something cool. I asked the Shiur. It's like this, that like, but halacha is only if it wasn't going to fall by itself. If, let's say, for example, you put such a flimsy beam that the lightest wind would blow it over, then it's no good. So imagine you live in one of these areas in Yerushalayim, they're constantly fighting. And what happens is, every Friday night, the non-phone go and cut down all the lechis and the koilos in order that people should be able to carry. So do you say, look, when Shabbos came in, it was a good beam. There's nothing wrong with it. And therefore, I'm allowed to carry. But as you just said, if it starts off Shabbos. Or do you say, no, because these beams were never going to be there for the whole Shabbos. The smallest wind would knock them over. Not that the smallest wind, literally. But you knew that was going to be uprooted. It's not, let's say in a situation where it's quite definite.
It's fairly definite.
They said it's okay. This is okay. At the end of the day.
Because then they stopped doing it then. Why Manchester, if you hear that the air has gone down on Shabbos, is there a problem?
That's a different thing. That is because that before Shabbos came in.
You get a text a few hours before, don't you?
No, if on Shabbos somebody noticed that and he got told it went down today.
On Shabbos, yes, you can carry as long as only a lechi or mov or koira, not if it's a proper wall. This is, we're talking about when there's 3 proper walls, and mov has got 3. A cul-de-sac always has 3 walls. Remember the first picture. And then a lechi and a koira only has a simon to remind people not to carry out to the mov. If a wall fell down, it's a different thing. Okay, I don't get. It was just interesting. I remember the first gets all worked up. Anyway, what's a, where wall falls down depends on how big the. No, it doesn't. It doesn't come to source of Pesach. No, the very first picture. If you ever saw the first picture, every cul-de-sac has 3 walls, and then the lechi and the koira is just to make a simon for the beginning. Okay, so again, the Gemara says like this: something which is mutter when Shabbos comes in is mutter the whole Shabbos. The Gemara told us 2 cases. Case number 1, which is the general, the halach, and then the general. Case number 1 was where you had a window and entrance, and the window and entrance got blocked on Shabbos. It's okay. And it said zeh haklal. It's coming to include A mobi with a lechi in the kurfa carries on. Kol shnes and mixes Shabbos nesa lechol Shabbos kol going today bottom state siddur shusam keep from nochim mechit to Shabbos. Let's say we live on two sides of Bereniah Road, and on Shabbos we couldn't carry from our house to Bereniah Road, and then on Shabbos this is picture Tov Yud Ches, and then somebody went and built a wall on Shabbos. You can't. Why? Because when Shabbos came in, you couldn't carry. Because this area between the two belongs to the two of us. Says Rashi, and I'll tell you even more than that. This picture in Tov Yud Ches, if you look at it, what would happen if one of them would be mevatel reshus to the other? It says Afal Pikenu would be awesome. Because since when Shabbos came in, it was awesome. You can't do anything to make it mutter on Shabbos. And then we have to add Zeh Klal La'asuyei Mai La'asuyei Meis Nochi B'Shabbos. If let's say there was a guy living in the neighborhood, and we never rented from him. So what's the halacha? We made an Eiruvin, we never rented from him. Is the Eiruvin valid? No. Oh, and what happens is the guy then dies on Shabbos. Are you allowed to carry? No. Doesn't help. That's it. The Ketoni, chutz mevatel reshus. The exception is mevatel reshus. Iuen yeresh lo. The Gemara the Dike that the only exception is bitul reshus. Bitul reshus is the case we can change bitul Shabbos. For example, Shabbos comes in, none of us are allowed to carry because we didn't bother making an Eruv. And on Shabbos, we do bitul reshus, it works. So that's the case where it changes on Shabbos. Normally, things don't change on Shabbos. Like we explained just now. That, for example, if the lechita falls down, it's okay. If the wall gets blocked, it's okay. But if the walls were made on Shabbos, it's not okay because it all starts with the Shabbos. Exception is bitul reshus. But it doesn't say vat reshus and yeresh. Iuen yeresh lo. Ema answers Gemara chutz b'Torah that's bitul reshus. The exception is not just bitul reshus of the person himself, but the whole parsha, the whole idea of bitul reshus, which is the person himself or the yeresh. So you've got no right. So again, the question was, kind of yeresh vat reshus, vat machlek. It's trying to be right for this price, which talks about lots of different halachas. And in the middle, it mentions about bitul reshus, and it doesn't talk about yeresh. And it says it means the concept, the idea of bitul reshus, which looks like eisvin. Echad v'echotzer shemeis. A person living in a chotzer. Imagine Reuven, Shimon, Levi live together, and Reuven dies. And he dies, and now somebody else owns it who lives in a different neighborhood. If he died on Friday, if he died on Shabbos, similarly, what happened was like this. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi all live together. And what happened was they made an Eruv, the Mazaka for him an Eruv. But then what happened was he died on Shabbos and he gave it over to somebody within the same chotzer to have an extra house. Now, something that extra chotzer, he's got now two properties. So it doesn't answer because the Eruv works for that. Why is it also Levata? The one who gets a property on Shabbos, what's his problem? He should be Levata. Says more my oisa now we telling on shivat when we say osa, we don't mean literally osa, we mean osa until he does bitul. But once he's done bitul, then he's not osa. Now the question is, do we carry on? Next Gemara only goes to stops. No, the next Gemara only stops about 15-20 lines down. It says we'll stop here. Right. Okay, we're up to Tosh Shema on Einamut base. We're discussing kind of person who's a yeresh do bitul reshus on Shabbos. What? Oh, wait, I'm not trying to work out. I tried to find out. Yes, that's.